Good afternoon, our online audience. We are delighted to welcome all our North American partners to this exclusive event. We are here live in Montreal with Mr. Martin Imbleau, President and CEO of the Port of Montreal, and Mr. Peter Tirschwell, Vice President, Maritime and Trade at IHS Markit JOC, as they discuss Martin's first year at the helm of the second largest port of Canada, supply chain challenges, Martin vision on decarbonization, and of course, the largest infrastructure project in the history of the Port of Montreal, the Quay Container Terminal Expansion Project. We encourage everybody in this room and our online audience to send us your questions that our speakers will address in the end of the presentation. So please go to slido.com. You should see it on the screens, the instructions how to access it. There you go. Please send us your questions. Go to slido.com and use the code 0112. It's the date of the event. And send us your questions. I believe online audience will receive it through the chat. And we're ready to go. Martin, Peter, over to you.
Great, thank you very much. Great pleasure to be here. And first of all, Martin, I want to thank you for indulging in my preference for the English language.
Thank you, Peter.
And I also want to thank you and all of your colleagues at the Port of Montreal for inviting me and having me here with you. It's a great honor, and I look forward to our conversation.
It's a pleasure. It's an honor to share this lunch with you and with the industry.
Well, good. So let's just dive right in. You've been in your job for 1 year, approximately, and this has not been any ordinary year in this industry. It's arguably the 1 year that people are going to look back on, going to be when everything completely went to hell, or everything completely went off the rails. However you want to describe it, it was this year. So one has to wonder about your timing, whether it was great timing or if it was questionable timing in some ways. But tell us how the year has been for you.
The year has been good personally and professionally. We've started the year with, of course, the pandemic situation, and then the Suez blockage, and then we had a local strike here, and then we're in the middle of a crisis internationally, which is affecting everyone. But I think Port of Montreal has been pretty resilient, and for me personally, it kind of gave me room to maneuver, to learn the business probably more rapidly with the team, and to learn what are the main issue and how we can influence the food chain. So I'm not complaining. I'm having a lot of fun. On a scale of 1 to 10, my happiness is at 22. So really enjoying it. And finally, we have an opportunity to meet with people. But it's still an adaptation because I've spent 25 years in the energy business. So 11 months in the making, and so I'm definitely not the expert yet.
Well, very good. Were there any particular learnings from your first year that you take away as you go into your second year?
I think that the positive aspect and the negative aspect is probably the same, is that I've been a neighbor of the port for 25 years, and I've never really noticed how important the Port of Montreal is for Quebec and for the economy in general. So there's a lot of of opportunities to improve on that. But on the other hand, I've discovered.
Unfortunately, about live events, would rather you use those, okay, just so everybody here as well.
Is that better for back of the room? Sorry for that.
That's better. Sorry.
So the port is so key for Ontario and Quebec and the Midwest, and people don't realize it. So there's an opportunity, and that took me by surprise. So there are ways to improve it. But on the other hand, I'm joining an organization that affects 100% of the corporation and 100% of the citizens in Quebec. So it's just amazing in terms of strength and opportunities for the future.
Have you formed a view over the past year of what you hope to accomplish during your tenure as the head of the Port of Montreal?
A question was put to me when I joined, what is your 100-day plan? And I said, the port has been there for 200 years. If I had a 100-day plan, I'd be a liar. I do have some goals, some objectives, some priorities. The first thing I've said to the team is probably change and adapt our mental posture. I'm joining an industry that is used and very good in talking to itself and creating value and optimizing its own realities. But I think we can do the industry a better job with two other perspectives. One is a perspective from the inside of the industry, so inside of the port, vis-a-vis the outside. So reaching out to communities, reaching out to stakeholders so they can really appreciate how important and necessary we and you are for them. But there's another angle, is to open the doors and let ourselves be influenced by our stakeholders. We're good, but we can be better by opening the doors and having all the stakeholders tell us how we can move things, how we can improve, and notably, how we can decarbonize more our industry.
So that's an interesting perspective, because some ports are more open to their community than others. Do you have any early indication of ways that you see the broader community positively influencing the port and positively influencing your direction?
There are a few ways. One key one is to communicate largely about how beneficial the port is for the community and how important it is. So it's like a marketing aspect, but for me, the dialogue with the stakeholders is more important. Let me give you an example. It's called the Port of Montreal, but it's really the Port of Quebec, the Port of Ontario, and to some extent, the Port of the Midwest. Well, in Abitibi and in Eastern Township, people don't think about the Port of Montreal. So we need to go out and let them know what we do for them and how we can do a better job in serving them. So that would be one of the angle. And the second one is we want our neighbors not only to tolerate us, but to appreciate us and be proud of the port. So they need to see us more active. So we'll be developing ways for neighbors to look at us more positively in the future.
So I want to get back to your goals and your aspirations. And you mentioned over lunch that you were in Glasgow for the recent COP26 meeting. When it comes to decarbonization, obviously a huge issue in the maritime industry, an issue arguably that the maritime industry is struggling with. How do you see decarbonization playing a role in the development and direction of the Port of Montreal?
That is probably one of the most important angle or more important aspect to tackle, not because it's a fun thing to do, but because it's the right thing to do. We are facing a climate urgency, and the maritime industry generates 3 to 4% of the global GHG, and we feel that things can move more rapidly. So we need to reduce our own carbon footprint, but we will position ourselves as a player or facilitator, and we'll play upstream and downstream of our typical or historical playground. For example, Montreal East today represent a carbon-intensive industry. That industry will have to change over time. So it represents a burning platform, but what a huge opportunity to work with them, transform their business so they can help us produce green liquids for our own purposes and the purposes of people watching on the video right now. And Quebec has a unique feature. 100% of the electricity generated in Quebec is green. It's all renewable. So if we can produce hydrogen or methanol, we'll be 100% decarbonized. And I always carry with me this bottle. I won't name the name of the corporation that makes it, but when you go back home, ask your kids if they would want to see the carbon footprint of everything that they buy and the product that they buy. I'm sure they'll say yes. In months to come, in years to come, you will see a logo on everything that is bought and shipped, the carbon footprint of the product being shipped and transported. Well, I want Montreal to be part of decarbonization, and our partners in the room would say, Montreal is a good place to go because their carbon footprint is way less than elsewhere. So it's both aggressive and from a defensive perspective that we're doing it.
I just want to follow up, Martin, on that, because when you say that you're hoping to play in the decarbonization arena upstream and downstream from the port, and Quebec being a province that is fully carbon neutral in terms of its energy, as you say, and you come from that background, do you see an opportunity to support your maritime industry customers, and particularly the ship owners and operators, to solve this problem for themselves? Because all indications are that there's a lot of experimenting going on. Nobody really knows the answer yet as to how shipping is going to be decarbonized, and the industry is looking for answers now, and they're pretty much looking to anybody who has good ideas.
Of course, a strategy without an execution plan remains an hallucination, and we won't fall in that. But I've spent enough time in the energy business developing concrete solution to decarbonize to a certain extent and ultimately completely the industry. I was in a meeting this morning with a company that I won't name, but electrification of some ships is something that can see the light in years to come, not decades to come. So we'll work on that and we'll support them to achieve that. But we need a liquid, because every time you cannot use electricity directly, you transform electricity to a liquid, and the liquid has to be green. And the Port of Montreal, with its land, with its partner, with its knowledge, can help technology-wise, financial-wise, but more importantly, being a facilitator between the parties to push them, to incite them to decarbonize their activities. So yes, we'll be playing in that playground for sure.
Great, thank you very much. I want to talk about a subject that you had brought up very briefly before, which is labor, and you said I could ask you anything, so I'll just plunge right in on this one. You know, I've been covering this industry for quite a while now. It is fairly apparent that labor unrest, longshore labor unrest, is not healthy for a port. And so, you know, you guys have experienced a bit of longshore labor unrest over the past 2 years. My questions to you is, what is the impact that has had on the perceptions of the port among your port users? And do you think it's behind you now? And what are the messages that you can send to the customers, for example, the shippers whose supply chains depend on the Port of Montreal? What is your message to them following that particular episode?
Thanks for the question, and it's probably the hot topic for everyone here. It's a concern. Our reputation was affected, is affected internationally with the strikes we had 2 years ago and this year, and we're concerned about future negotiation. I won't get involved into the aspect of negotiation because we're not at the table. But I had a chance to do a visit in Europe a few weeks ago, and that was one of the main concerns for all the shippers. But what we accomplished this year is just fantastic. First, we had a government that was appreciative of the nature of the port, who decided to pass along a special law so we can go back to work. And second thing is that we've never been in such a crisis in the history of the maritime industry over the last 50 years. Let's just have a thought for our colleagues in Vancouver, who are suffering even more than us today. So we had a strike, then the flooding, then some blockage. Isn't it the best opportunity to sit down with all the stakeholders and say, look guys, look everyone, we are necessary not for our own purposes, but for all the citizens. It gives us, I think, a platform for a discussion with all the stakeholders. And I'm of the optimistic view that people want to improve their quality of life, and we'll see something that is positive out of this. When, I don't know exactly, but the timing is good to change our mindset about ensuring that the port is open 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, without affecting the rights of the parties, like an employer or an employee.
It's interesting that you put it in that perspective, Martin, because I think you are reflecting a certain reality, which is that the importance of not just the maritime industry and seaports, but supply chains, which is what everybody's in the business of facilitating, has never been brought in front of the public in a way that it is today. And so are you saying that as a result of the environment that we're in, that the opportunity to have different types of conversations within the ecosystem actually is better now than it might have been a year ago, 2 years ago, certainly pre-pandemic?
I think you're absolutely right. We can have today a conversation with a family in Hochelaga Maisonneuve about the importance of their supply chain, or with a large retailer sitting around the table, or an elected official in Ottawa. Had a chance to fly to Glasgow, as you mentioned, so I flew back to Quebec with the Prime Minister of Quebec, so I had a chance to explain how things were going. So it creates a burning platform, and I'm hearing things over lunch and just before lunch, how the supply chain is adapting to the new reality. So commercially, we're adapting ourselves, but maybe there's an opportunity to think about the paradigm in which we operate at the Port of Montreal and at other ports in Canada. So maybe we're mature for the next conversation.
Well, and it also gets back to your own perspective, because as you indicated, and is the fact when one looks at your resume, that you don't come from this industry, you come from outside the industry, and so you are bringing a perspective to all of this that is certainly going to be very different from those of your various and sundry stakeholders who have spent their entire career moving freight in one form or another. Did this job appeal to you in part for that reason, and do you feel that you bring personally a perspective to all these issues that might be helpful in trying to move some of these issues along?
Definitely. I spend my life in public utilities, energy public utilities. And the success of a public utility, it's not its own success. It's the success of all the stakeholders and all of the food chain of an industry. And that's what the port is a public service. So our own benefit is important, but it's not critical. Your benefit and getting goods to people in shops competitively and with the carbon footprint that gets lesser and lesser intensive is what the port is all about. So maybe I'm bringing that angle, but I'm working with a fantastic team who had that DNA. It's probably just an additional ingredient in being maybe a bit more aggressive on that front. And it's a great industry to be in at this time.
Yeah, good. Okay, so now I'm properly speaking into the microphone. You think that I would have had enough experience to know that I needed to do this, but apparently not. So apologize to everyone if you were hearing every second or every third word of what I was saying. Martin, in the time that we have remaining, I want to talk about Contrecoeur. So obviously a huge project, a huge initiative for the Port of Montreal, arguably the biggest that you've undertaken in many, many years. And also the way that you're approaching it is very different as well. So can you tell us just a little about it and like kind of how you see this project from your perspective? And in particular, I want to get to the question of, given the fact that you unveiled the RFP within the last few weeks, kind of what kind of a partner you're looking for to really maximize the opportunity that's presented by Contrecoeur.
Thanks for the question. It is by
by a large scale, the largest project that the Port of Montreal has ever managed. That being said, we're close to being full in Montreal. In a few years, we'll be full, and a public service has a moral obligation to build facilities ahead of the parade. If you're late in the parade, you're not respecting your mandate in terms of economic development. So we've been developing this for years, and we want to do something that is not only a pier or a jetty. We want to build and operate something that will be an example for decades and generations to come. It's very rare that you have an opportunity to start basically from scratch with a land that we own. Permits have been obtained, a project that is fairly de-risked. So it's a unique situation to get involved with a partner, to get back to your question, that is not a client, that is not just a commercial relation, but that is a partner, because we'll be there for decades to come. So we want a partner that shares our DNA and philosophy in terms of decarbonization. Innovation has to be part of the future. This will be there for decades, as I mentioned. We think we can capture much more business in Montreal and Contrecoeur than we have today. So we want someone or a group or a consortium that has a strong marketing ability. So basically, building something for generation and something that we will be proud of. And it's hopefully just the first phase, because potentially there are 2 or 3 phases to come after.
And just to pick up on one of the points you just made, so you believe that obviously there's significant growth potential at the Port of Montreal. You wouldn't be embarking on this journey if you didn't feel that. But can you give maybe a little bit more flavor of why you see such an opportunity ahead of you at Montreal?
Demography, one thing, just in and of itself. The track record of the last 10 to 15 years. Even if we were to grow basically at a certain percentage that I won't divulge, which is very, very prudent, we would be full in a few years. Pressure is increasing in Montreal to operate. Fluidity is an issue. So just the normal growth would suffice to justify Contrecoeur. We think we have an ability to get to the Midwest much more economically and efficiently than we are today, which would bring more businesses to Montreal compared to other ports. So definitely we'll be more aggressive in Ontario, in the Midwest, and to other regions in Quebec. So it's the normal growth plus the business we can capture.
So that's very exciting, very interesting, especially because when you talk in those terms, you're really kind of exiting the port world, and to go back to a point we were making earlier, you're entering into the supply chain world, and you're talking about how you are supporting containerized supply chains, how you are addressing the needs of customers in terms of transit times, in terms of reliability. So there's obviously some thinking underway here that the full opportunity that Montreal has in order to capture its rightful share of the market has not been fully exploited at this point.
That I'm sure. I'm 100% convinced that there's more opportunities to come, and I'll depart a bit from your question to talk about climate resiliency. But if you are to position your business for the next 50 years, I'm sure from an investor point of view, you will want to position yourself in a resilient port. So the Port of Montreal is well protected, and we will be demonstrated how resilient we can be from a climate perspective. So it's the nice place to build infrastructure. It's a good place to have your distribution center. It's a nice place to have a starting point to reach your market in Ontario and in the Midwest. So we're not there yet, but what we're seeing in other ports and how the climate is affecting the operation, Montreal, for decades to come, will demonstrate itself as one of the most resilient ports. So that will also be a key feature for our development.
Well, terrific, Martin. I'm watching the clock. We have a little clock here, which is to keep us honest in regard to the time, and I see that our time is literally running out as we speak. I think that you wanted to play a video, you wanted to show the audience something else, so I'll let you to do that, but I'll just tell you that it was such a pleasure to have the opportunity to spend a little bit of time with you and to talk about all of these very interesting subjects, and I want to wish you all the best luck in your role as you go forward here.
Thank you for your time, and we haven't had the time to talk about innovation, but I invite you to look at our website about a few innovation and AI application that we're developing. We had a chat about this over lunch. Look at the website, talk to our team. But those projects and that positioning is all about people, so I'll let people of the Port of Montreal talk about the Contrecoeur project. And thank you again, Peter, for your hospitality.
My pleasure.
The Port of Montreal has a unique business model. We welcome ships that arrive full and that leave full. For major shipping lines, Montreal is a full capacity round trip. We are committed to that strategic positioning, and our expansion to Contrecoeur will reinforce it.
Contrecoeur is by far the largest expansion project for the Montreal Port Authority. This infrastructure is well connected to highways and main Class 1 railways. Our project is strategically located in Contrecoeur, and we're clearly committed on a modern environmental project, so we're very excited.
On va vérifier avec notre équipe technique si nous avons des questions. Est-ce qu'il y en a des questions pour nos conférenciers d'honneur? Est-ce qu'on peut les projeter? Peter,
Okay,
can we take some questions? Do we have some time?
Okay, good. Let's do
Let's
that.
go.
Martin, we've got a few questions from the audience. Tell us about the technology that will be used in the new Contrecoeur terminal, to the extent that you know it at this point.
We're good at the Port of Montreal, but we're not that good. So what we've decided is, in the RFP that we're launching, is to ask the potential bidders for innovation and technology of the future. So we will ask them to propose us what should be done to ensure that we build something that is up to scale and innovative. So it's not that prescriptive. So, but we want someone that can leapfrog the Port of Montreal for the next decades.
Great. So another question. Can you all hear me? I think you guys can hear me okay now? All right, good. In this past July, a 6,700 TEU ship came to the Port of Montreal and docked here. With larger ships such as this one visiting the port, do you see this size ship becoming the norm at the port here?
Potentially, but you know what? Maybe it's not what Montreal needs. I think what Montreal brings is fluidity, reliability, and quick execution, quick turnaround, no waiting time. So we have a different business model. We're not in the gigantism model. So we're quite pleased with how things are working right now. And there are ways to increase the size of ships. There's a special design that could be implemented, but we're not there to really go for the big one. I think it's really the fluidity of our business model that is the most appealing. We're not there to compare with other destination port or other rotation port that have the huge ships. It's really not our model.
Actually, and it's a fair statement to say that big ships, the really big ones, have been subject to quite a bit of criticism. In other words, they accomplish the goal of creating economies of scale for the ocean carriers, but you ask the shipper how long it takes for their cargo to get unloaded, and it's not clear at all. In fact, it's quite unclear that those ships really work to the best interests of all the stakeholders?
I'm a big believer of capacity factor optimization. The right size at the right time for the right market is more important than the largest one, and I think Montreal is well placed for that.
Let's go back to the to COP26. It was very interesting, actually, because at the prior meetings, there was very little discussion of maritime, and at the COP26 in Glasgow, there was a great deal of discussion of maritime, particularly, and this was probably the most important maritime development that came out of that, was the endorsement of green corridors. And so the question is, can you give us any details on the agreement with the Port of Antwerp? Is there the potential to create a green corridor according to the blueprint of COP26 connecting Montreal and Antwerp?
We have a great relationship with our partner in Antwerp, and what we announced there is our willingness, as I mentioned before, to influence the stakeholders in the maritime industry to decarbonize and put in place solutions. They have a industrial reality that is similar to Montreal, so both of us want to be the port of entry and the ultimate destination on both sides of the ocean, offering green solutions. Only being the only port doesn't make any sense. Will it be a triangle one, or a 4-port, or 12 ports? It's not an exclusive relationship, but we want to be at the forefront. And as you said, Glasgow for me was an eye-opener because the pressure is increasing on our industry. So we want to be ahead of the parade in providing that technological and energy solution.
Great, thank you. And a really good question. How is congestion and supply chain challenges at Western Canada and U.S. ports? You know, I just got off a webinar before I was here. I was talking about how, you know, as of a week ago, there was something like 90 container ships, 90, waiting for a berth at the Port of LA Long Beach. We've never seen congestion on that scale ever in the history of the container, going back to Malcolm McLean. Let's be honest about that. That's the truth of how severe it is. How is all of those problems influencing traffic flows at the Port of Montreal, as you see it?
We're quite fortunate, of course, in and of itself at the Port of Montreal. We're not congested just because of our market, of our business model, because we empty all the ships. So ships come in full, 100% full. We empty the ship completely and then goes back full again. So there's no waiting time, there's no anchor ship because of that. So the slotting aspect is not affected at all in Montreal. So that's a positive sign. Two things. We're seeing empty containers being shipped from Montreal as we've never seen before. So it's affecting also our business. And the last thing is that even though the port itself is not affected, economically, Quebec and Ontario are affected because of what's happening elsewhere. And one negative sign that we're seeing is that our industry, for probably the first time in history, so the logistic industry is contributing to the inflation. We have an inflation of around 4% in the country, and the logistic aspect is affecting the inflation. So port is doing well, but the ultimate customers are affected. We're not completely... we're affected to some extent.
I guess a follow-up question to that could be, I noticed the other day that you saw your first direct call from China at the Port of Montreal. And at least as the article that I read described it, we didn't write the article, somebody else did, so I can't vouch for its authenticity. But they said that you had never gotten a direct call from China before.
True.
Is that true?
True. That was the first one to reach Montreal directly from China. Is that something that we will see more? Potentially. I think there are businesses out there who want to be more and more independent about managing their own supply. So we'll see how it unfolds.
But are there, I guess the question would be, are there, because of all the disruption being seen on the West Coast, both in the U.S. and Canada, does that create opportunities for the Port of Montreal that might not have been there had that not happened?
In the short term, probably marginal opportunities, some, but marginal. But I think in terms of positioning and long term, as I said, the resiliency aspect and the business model that we have, I've heard it before, and I'm going to repeat it. I don't think we're in the just-in-time model anymore. We're in the just-in-case model. Well, Montreal kind of fits perfectly in a just-in-case strategy because of our reliability and our resilience.
Yep, very good.
Last question.
So we're going to take one more question. Okay, so Martin, I'm going to go back to a question that I know that you want to talk more about because we didn't have time to talk about it before, but the use of AI at the port. Any more projects like the Cargo 2 AI? How is it working? This is a question we were talking about over lunch. Are you creating value out of your technology investments? Are behaviors changing? Are you seeing real efficiencies emerge from that would not have happened had you not gone down this technology journey?
Cargo 2 AI was the first application to predict and to optimize the shipment and the treatment of some critical goods at the port. Close to 6,000 containers have been handled. But the next step, our next frontier, is our application called Argo. Our colleagues were in Barcelona days ago to present Argo. And Argo is to get all the data, ensure that there are anonymous information, collect them, and use the artificial intelligence and predicting how the ships, the trains, our own train can be optimized and then pass along the information so everyone in that room can optimize their food chain and their line of business. So it's not mature yet, but it's getting there. So you'll hear a lot about it in the coming months.
Well, thank you very much, Peter. Thank you very much, Martin. It was a wonderful session. It was very insightful. I hope everybody in this room and online appreciated this conversation. Let's give a big round of applause to our speakers.